Thank you, and thank you to Dr. Nihal Thomas for inviting me to share some of our work in this area. It's in a nutrition symposium because it probably deals with chronic overnutrition. And although most of us will have to remain undernourished for the next 3 hours before our lunch is given to us, we should draw some of the nutrition from this session itself, I'm told. So I'll try to, trace chronic overnutrition to diabetes risk, particularly in the context of Indians and maybe most South Asians. And in that context, I'll also share some of the work that we've been doing in this area. So broadly, it will start with what we all are aware of, the twin cycle hypothesis, which actually talks of a reversible pathogenesis for type 2 diabetes based on consumption of high energy. Talk a little bit about adipose tissue, because the twin cycle hypothesis, as is projected, doesn't deal with it in that much detail. It focuses more on muscle insulin resistance. Talk about adipogenesis and consequences in terms of lipid metabolism, and how the high lipids can lead to type 2 diabetes, and what is the work in that area from our center. How do South Asians and Indians differ from Caucasians? What is the relevance and pathogenic correlates of diabetes risk in them, and is there any role of genes? And then we'll come back to the twin cycle and make a unified hypothesis. So broadly, it's energy handling, which is basically nutrition. So this is the concept, and I'll spend a little time on this because we need to understand this to understand the rest of the talk. Positive energy balance, the most important component of which would be a chronic excess energy intake, whether it's fat or carbohydrates, has been proposed to lead to type 2 diabetes and beta cell dysfunction through these twin cycles, as we are all aware, because it is said that when you consume excess of energy, it gets into the fat because the muscle doesn't utilize it, all the energy that is required because of insulin resistance that is pre-existent. That's how it is proposed by Taylor in the UK. And this sets off, in fact, activates 2 cycles. Initially the hepatic cycle, which we're somewhat familiar with, causes increase in VLDL secretion from the liver, also increases hepatic insulin resistance, increases plasma glucose, fasting particularly, and then this increased triglycerides, which are not taken up by the adipose tissue, and this part has not been dealt with in much detail in this particular hypothesis. And we believe that in South Asians, this must be the most important arm that's working, because several studies have suggested in Indians that the adipose is dysfunctional, defective, and probably restrictive, and therefore the ability to gobble up triglycerides as a result of from the consumed high energy is defective, and therefore this trapping, which is less, leads to accumulation of the fat or the triglycerides in the plasma, which much more than the secretion of the liver, and then gets into the pancreas. And when it gets into the pancreas, it causes a reversible dysfunction of the beta cells, causes diabetes. The good thing about this hypothesis is that it can be reversed. It's not all genes, all the genes contribute. So if you're able to control or modulate the energy intake, then you can reverse diabetes, and that's the basis for all diabetes reversal programs these days. The problem with this hypothesis, to my mind, is that it focuses more on hepatic source of VLDL, whereas I believe, and the current concepts of triglycerides believe that the most important source is that the energy is not picked up by the fat, and the liver comes next. And in Indians, this is more important. Second issue is that if somebody heard the morning talk there is a crosstalk between the liver and the pancreas, and therefore even if it doesn't get into the pancreas, just getting into the liver, the fat, can indirectly cause decreased insulin secretion by hepatokines. So the focus probably, the liver has a greater role, which is not emphasized by this hypothesis, and we'll gradually look at how the adipose tissue fits into all this as we go along. Adipose tissue is the key for energy metabolism, as most of us would be aware, so it obviously can't be all liver. One of the most important tissues contributing to energy balance is adipose tissue because of lipogenesis and lipolysis. As you can see here, the energy production storage is insulin sensitive. Lipid storage is in the form of triglycerides. And when you have a problem with this function of the adipose tissue, the triglycerides in the blood would increase, particularly post-meal. As you can see, and as you can see, what was not highlighted by the traditional twin cycle hypothesis On the left, if you would see, the chylomicron TGs are added to the VLDL triglycerides, right at the left part of the cartoon. So chylomicron triglycerides are equally or probably more important as people realize, and current studies show. That means the post-meal triglycerides. Immediately what you consume is gets absorbed and gets converted to chylomicron, and triglycerides are carried as chylomicron. The VLDL is supposed to come from the liver. So chylomicron triglycerides is probably more important in this lipogenesis lipolysis cycle, particularly in the fed state. The lipogenesis is all chylomicrons, which is cleared and taken into the adipose tissue. So that's important to understand because we'll need to talk about it a little later. Adipose tissues store energy in the form of triglycerides. That is what is lipogenesis. And when it doesn't happen, you have ectopic deposition. We all know that. Any defect in the ability to store the excess energy fat as triglyceride in the adipose tissue leads to increased triglyceride levels in the serum, and this is what we describe as a postprandial hypertriglyceridemia. It is all in the fed state. In the fasting state, it goes to the muscle, heart, and other places. But in the fed state, it goes primarily to the adipose tissue. So when you eat something, the energy is directed directly to the adipose tissue, and if the adipose tissue is defective, your triglycerides go up. Simply put, that is what happens. Therefore, we need to understand a little bit about adipogenesis as well. Adipogenesis refers to the process by which precursor cells differentiate and become committed to storing lipid and maintaining energy homeostasis in the adipocytes. So if your adipocytes are good in function and are committed and multiply as you take more energy, they will accommodate all the excess energy that you're taking. This is what happens in Caucasians. They have a better system. More and more fat accumulation occurs in the adipose tissue. They become fatter, but the consequences of that increased fatness is much later. In Indians, it's a little different. Adipogenesis is regulated by several factors, including the WNT pathway and two important diabetogenic genes, the PPR gamma and TCF7L2, which we are both familiar with, most consistently associated with diabetes. Subcutaneous adipose tissue is where most of the energy gets stored. And we've known that if there is restricted adipogenesis, there is lipotoxicity, ectopic fat. I will not go into that. So these are the steps that actually lead from a positive energy balance to type 2 diabetes. If you see the bottom half of this cartoon, the positive energy balance, if it fails to get into the adipose tissue, increase in the lipid flux to non-adipose organs, into the liver, pancreas, muscles, causing resistance and insulin deficiency in the pancreatic islets, all of which ultimately lead to diabetes, the broad pathway. We showed in an experimental study, I think it was 2016, that this postprandial triglyceridemia, in my view, this is a marker of impaired energy balance or impaired handling of high energy, because that's what increases the postprandial triglycerides primarily. That led to insulin resistance in this experimental model. And this was a diet-induced diabetes model. And the sequence showed that the moment you start taking high energy or in the terms of fat or sucrose, within 2 weeks you have postprandial hypertriglyceridemia developing. At 10 weeks you have insulin resistance. So insulin resistance follows. At 26 weeks in the rats, that is, pre-diabetes follows, and then finally diabetes. So the sequence is very clear. High energy intake, increased triglycerides, especially post-meal, followed by insulin resistance, followed by pre-diabetes. So what we are saying, in the LAT model, we showed that chronic and recurrent high energy intake and meal-related surges in lipids results in insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, and diabetes. So that's number one, which was probably not emphasized that much in the past. Most of the time, the postprandial lipids were considered to be as a cardiovascular risk marker, rather than being pathogenic for type 2 diabetes. This was among one of the first studies which actually links or says that, postprandial lipids, probably as a result of high energy intake, is pathogenic for type 2 diabetes. And PPT, gym-induced metabolism, appears to be a major determinant for the risk of developing type 2 diabetes mellitus. And additional this was a diet-induced model. Additional genetic influences could further compromise energy handling and further increase or predispose to diabetes risk. This is where we come to the second part of the talk, South Asians or Indians. This simple study in South Asians versus Caucasians, where it was shown that an acute high consumption of high-fat, high-carbohydrate diet administered to 12 healthy, young, lean male South Asians, and 12 matched Caucasians for just 5 days. Caused insulin resistance. Insulin resistance was measured by the traditional gold standard hyperinsulinemic euglycemic clamp. It showed that the insulin-stimulated disposal rates were abnormal in South Asians, but not in Caucasians. So insulin resistance developed in 5 days on this high-energy meal in South Asians. Did not do so in Caucasians for a reason that I've told you, that they have enough resource or enough expandability of their adipose depots, so it doesn't lead to insulin resistance. So this avid response of the South Asian to a high-energy diet and rapid induction of IR in them indicates that there is an altered handling of high-energy intake among Indians in a manner that leads to insulin resistance. And therefore, the implications are very clear. So if South Asians indulge in high-energy intake, as has been going on in the last 3 decades, there will be significant increase in insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. That is probably what is triggering or fueling the type 2 epidemic in our country. What underlies all this is the Asian Indian phenotype, which you've all heard about several times. We all know it's a partial lipodystrophy state. It's also called a partial lipodystrophy state with restricted adipogenesis in the subcutaneous adipose tissue. This is what basically is the thin fat Indian. That means basically it's thin. The fat depots don't expand, subcutaneous depots don't expand that much. However, they have very high visceral adipose tissue. We are all familiar with this. Is primarily because, and also a consequence and also a promoter of an abnormal handling of high fat or carbohydrate in our diet. We'll see how. Look at the bottom and the top both. The top is the Caucasian. The same cycle which I told initially, how energy intake leads to diabetes risk. Now you compare Caucasians with South Asians. And this was published in PLOS One by a group, I think, from the UK. Caucasians respond to energy intake by adipocyte hyperplasia. We are aware of that. That means you can see the number of fat cells multiplying. So more adipogenesis taking place. And all the excess energy gets gobbled up, trapped in the adipose tissue. So excess subcutaneous fat, excess fattiness. No visceral fat depots expansion till late. Therefore, no fat in the liver. So normal glucose tolerance, normal insulin resistance. The bottom half, excess energy intake, leads to adipocyte hypertrophy. They don't have the capacity to multiply or have the capacity for adipogenesis. Therefore, you have only hypertrophy which causes dysfunction. And on the other hand, it causes flux into the visceral adipose tissue. So visceral adipose tissue increases and the liver and so on. And therefore, postprandial triglyceride probably a good metabolic marker, and Indians have higher degree of postprandial triglyceride metabolism. We've been, over the last 2-3 decades, one of the groups which has shown that PPTG abnormalities are universal among type 2 diabetics and even pre-diabetic patients in Indians. All kinds of patients, I won't describe each of them, newly detected, pre-diabetic, and everybody. So probably abnormal energy handling is universal in the natural history of type 2 DM in Indians. So is there a role for genes? The next 5 minutes will be spent on that. On the right is a study on pre-diabetic patients who had first degree relatives who were diabetics, and we showed very clearly that in them, it was linked to postprandial triglyceridemia, whereas in those without a family history, there was no postprandial triglyceridemia. The triglyceride was similar to those with NGT. On the left are studies on NGT by other groups, suggesting that there is familial clustering of this so-called PPHTG or abnormal energy handling, and therefore genetic factors could be operating. This was confirmed by studies from Jayapaul, where they actually showed that 16 out of the 138 lipodystrophy genes are differentially regulated in diabetic individuals, in patients. And they actually concluded that the Asian Indian thin fat phenotype represents a polygenic disorder of the adipocyte. And these are the mechanisms, these are the pathways. See, the WNT pathway in the adipose tissue is the most critical pathway in this regard. If you have a WNT pathway which is operating more, you have less of adipogenesis, more of diabetes risk. TCF7L2 actually promotes this pathway. So if you have excess expression of TCF7L2, more diabetes because of this. PPR gamma protects. It is negative on this pathway, which means increased adipogenesis, and we all know that PPR gamma agonists protect against diabetes and also protect against NAFLD. This is a study that we did publish in Endocrine in 2020, which actually showed that in the adipose tissue, PPR gamma gene expression is reduced, both in the subcutaneous adipose tissue as well as visceral fat, particularly in the subcutaneous adipose tissue, in pre-diabetic individuals as well as diabetic individuals compared to NGT. Not only that, it also very highly correlated with the postprandial triglyceride levels, suggesting that the lipogenesis is what is the key defect, and decreased expression of this gene in the adipose tissue alters lipogenesis and removes the protection that PPR gamma was offering, predisposing them to diabetes. TCF7L2, hitherto everybody was thinking its direct effects on insulin secretion. We hypothesized that probably it's the adipogenesis is an important contributor in Indians. And this was published in Frontiers in 2022, where we proposed that mechanism that probably it is this pathway of lipogenesis which is more important or important enough, both by polymorphism studies as well as expression studies in the adipose tissue. We actually found that there is increased expression of this gene in the adipose tissue, including the visceral adipose tissue, and it causes decreased adipogenesis, as we've discussed, again resulting in diabetes risk. One other gene that we studied was not linked directly to diabetes, but is related to browning, and browning is related to energy metabolism, handling of excess energy, oxidative metabolism, and so on. UCP1, we all know, is associated with increased browning, and PRDM is the gene which triggers the development of mitochondria in a particular adipocyte and predisposes them to a beige or a brown adipose site. And therefore, we find universally here that the UCP1 is expressed less, and the PRDM also is expressed less in the SAT. And they correlate to a large extent with the postprandial lipids. So again, those genes which are associated with energy expenditure and utilization of energy are defective in the adipose tissue. So probably all these studies actually show what? They show that, the hypothesis that genetically driven qualitative and quantitative changes in adipocyte differentiation among Indians probably determines the way our adipose tissue responds to high energy intake, which could be key determinants of their predisposition to type 2 diabetes mellitus. So what was shown initially in a diet-induced model, in South Asians we are saying that our genes further predispose to defective energy handling, and that's why we are probably more insulin resistant and more predisposed to develop diabetes. And now come back to the first slide. We'll spend the last 1 minute or 2 minutes on this, how we are changing this hypothesis or the paths. The same cycle, as you can see now, we have focused more on the subcutaneous fat depot. When you have excess energy intake, that is primarily being targeted by subcutaneous adipose tissue, which being defective, it doesn't enter the subcutaneous tissue. It's not as though the VLDL is coming from the liver and that is not getting into the adipose tissue. No, that's only part of the problem. The primary problem in South Asians and Indians probably is when we eat more, the chylomicrons, triglycerides don't get into the adipose tissue because of reasons that I've mentioned, and therefore the chylomicron TG, CMTG as I put it there, particularly in the postprandial phase, increases. Also that gets into the liver. Because it doesn't get into subcutaneous fat, it gets into the liver, the muscle, and the pancreas, and other sites. We all know that. And that's how it enters the liver. And this entry of the liver triggers or accelerates the hepatic cycle and the pancreatic cycle, which was already predisposed. And therefore, probably we are more, we have an accelerated twin cycle. So we convert faster. We all know that, a pre-diabetic individual converts to diabetes much faster in India. So our genes are such that these cycles operate much more rapidly, and probably it's a unique Asian Indian phenotype with its genetic signatures which helps them do so. And therefore, probably this is a far more unifying hypothesis of pathogenesis of type 2 diabetes mellitus, which are more valid for Indians, not just the hepatic cycle. Hepatic cycle comes later. The adipose tissue defect becomes a central mechanism. Several genetic studies are confirming this. And therefore, what I've done in the last 20 minutes is just to trigger your thoughts on the fact that, a chronic high energy intake could be far more detrimental to a South Asian or an Indian than it could be to a Caucasian, and it could act much faster in triggering diabetes than it would in a Caucasian. Thank you.
Background, prevalence of diabetes and glycemic control status, key dietary patterns, challenges in managing diabetes, solutions for diabetes management with this pattern of diets, and carry home messages. I am grateful to Professor S.B. Madhu for beautiful presentation, and I am in line of this same theme, but I should focus on a limited area, the Bengali speaking population. So probably the audience will be very much comfortable to understand what I am saying. Diabetes development and diabetes management are intricately linked to dietary patterns. So you have heard from Professor S.B. Madhu, and probably before that you are very much aware of this one. But the Bengali speaking population spanning Bangladesh, West Bengal and other parts of India and other parts of the world have unique food pattern and very much particularly intimated to development of diabetes and diabetes management. So these are the figure where the Bengali speaking population are now residing. Around 300 million Bengali speaking populations are now in the world according to 2024 information, and 168 million in Bangladesh, 114 million in West Bengal and other parts of India, and rest in the UK, USA, UAE, especially UAE and other parts of Middle East. Now, what is the prevalence of diabetes? Diabetes is now the global pandemic, you all know, but the prevalence of diabetes is now very sharply increasing in this subcontinent, especially in Bengali speaking population. According to IDF Atlas 10th edition, they have shown that the prevalence of diabetes is 12.5% in Bangladesh and 8.3% in India, and that includes also West Bengal. The prevalence of Bangladesh was also focused on the urban diseased people. It was about 33%, and the prevalence, the proportion of people with undiagnosed diabetes was 43.5% according to IDF Atlas, but we have our own separate informations. So another study, very good quality study published from Bangladesh in British Medical Journal, they showed that around 12.8% patients with diabetes, 14% pre-diabetes, and more notably 61.5% type 2 diabetes patients were unaware of their diabetes condition. So they were very much reluctant to go for lifestyle modification, including diets. But the National Family Health Survey of 2021 showed that in West Bengal, in total 22% of population had diabetes, and in Kolkata it was 11.7%, and the prevalence is between 3.5% and 5.7% in rural West Bengal areas. Now, the data we published in 2016, the prevalence of diabetes was high, but the control rate was very much poor. Only 18.8% patients with diabetes could control their diabetes with the mean HbA1c of 9.56%. Now, diet and diabetes. You all probably are again very much aware that the diet is more detrimental one to increase the diabetes in this population, not only this, but other parts of the world. So this is very much related to pathophysiology of having hyperglycemic condition, and we are having a bolus meal, especially in Bangladesh and West Bengal. We are usually taking 3 meals, very high glucose carbohydrate containing meals. So this is very much related to hyperglycemia. Now, the study published from the legendary endocrinologist from India, the V. Mohan, they also searched the same topic. Are excess carbohydrate the main link to diabetes and its complication in Asians? So they concluded that there are evidence to suggest that excess carbohydrate is linked to both susceptibility to type 2 diabetes mellitus and also to poor control of diabetes and pancreas, to complications of diabetes, and particularly in Asians. So finally, they told that the message for Indians, especially Asians, would be to cut down the carbohydrate consumption from 65 to 75% to 50 to 55%. So you can see that what are the larger amount of carbohydrate we are taking. And not only that, these people are taking less protein. So protein consumption should be increased, and fruits and vegetables and fiber should be taken at their regular meals. So these are the link for having hyperglycemia. Now another beautiful study published in Diabetes Care by Balaji Bhavodharani, and also Bhimohan was in the team. The white rice intake and incident diabetes study from more than 132,000 participants from 21 countries. There we can see that the high risk of population was also from this part of the person, and they concluded that the higher consumption of white rice is associated with an increased risk of incident diabetes, with strongest association being observed in South Asia, again the same population, while in other regions a modest non-specific association was seen. Now, Lancet published a very big data of 195 countries. They also searched for dietary association and the risk of not only diabetes, total non-communicable diseases. Here we can see that almost all dietary factors that are associated with the prevention of diabetes or good control of diabetes are suboptimally taken by this South Asian population. Only legumes are taken at a higher proportion. Again, the same situations, the red meat, processed meat we are taking a little, sugar sweetened beverage, not that, but the trans fats. Among the highest consumer, we are in the trans fat consumer of this South Asian population. Not only that, the same study tried to find out the mortality and the disability adjusted live year score, and we can find that the South Asian population are the higher category. So these are focusing their role of diet in diabetes development. So not only development, diabetes control is also hampered by the high glycemic. We saw the first case, but we are very much acquainted with the patients who are coming with the hyperglycemia. Every time they are taking food and there is shooting of blood sugar, and between meals there is chances of hypoglycemia. Weight management, sir told that we have the lean fat diabetes people in India, in Bangladesh are the same Bengali population. Even they are living in other countries, European or USA, they are also having the same lean fat proportion. So the weight management, but the day by day we are having the more obese population. The weight management is becoming challenging. So if we cannot change our diet, we cannot achieve the weight management, weight target. Not only that, many of the patients, including the obese patients, they have the specific nutrient deficiencies. So to cover these nutrient deficiencies, so dietary pattern should be adjusted. And the prevention of complication of diabetes is a challenge. So the South Asian population, including the Bengali speaking population, has the highest risk of cardiovascular events. Around 8 out of 10 people are dying due to cardiovascular event in this group. This is around 6.5 to 7 in other populations. So not only targeting the blood sugar, we have to target the cardiovascular risk reduction by adjusting their diets. So the consistency and timing, as I told you, we are taking 3 meals in Bangladesh especially, we are taking 3 huge meals, then we are having a long gap. So after having a glycemic surge, there is chances of having hypoglycemia. If we target optimal glycemic control, this is becoming challenging. So adopting and tailoring the diets, targeting the good glycemic control, or even then the prevention of diabetes and complication of diabetes should be very much optimistic. So what are the diet usually taken? What are the staple foods? You all know that rice is the main one, and a link of rice with the development of diabetes. I have shown the big data. Fish theoretically one of the important food item, but it is now becoming less available. Lentils and legumes still persisting. But the sweets and desserts, Bengali people are very much known for their sweet fondness. For every occasion, they are searching for sweet dishes. That may be coming from shops or homemade. They are very much fond of it. Even then, I have experience of visiting Bengali people living out of country in Europe or other countries. When they invite us, they like to serve homemade sweet dishes. And this is very, very much pertinent of their daily life. Vegetable and fruits, we are very much reluctant to take vegetables and fruits in our daily meals. Very recent data, not yet published, WHO funded data, the study conducted by a good researchers team with the support of Bangladesh government. They found that 63.4% of Bangladeshi adults usually not taking fruits in their daily meal. So you can assume that what is the condition. In probably other parts, Bengali speaking part, the West Bengal are in the same tone. Now the study on dietary pattern of patients with diabetes, this has been published from Bangladesh, but one of the authors from India, they showed that interesting finding that daily, weekly consumption of different food items, egg, fish, poultry, milk, pulses, leafy vegetables, beef, and we can see that fruits, 0. I told the previous data that is probably this year will be published, but it is published a few years back. They found no fruit consumption in a week. But rice, every person in the study group, they have more than 7 days they are taking rice. And they categorize the patient of low level risk, high level risk, and perfect level. We can see that almost according to calorie, carbohydrate intake, protein intake, and fat intake, the high number of participants are in the high risk level group due to their diets. So this study also tried to find out the main food items they are consuming. It is probably again very much understandable, the cereals and their products, pulses, legumes, and vegetables and their product, though less, leafy vegetables, very few, starchy rots, tubers and their products, nuts, fruits, pickles, meat, processed meat, fish and seafood is very rarely been taken in Bangladeshi population. Probably most of the seafoods are being exported from our sea areas. Eggs, milk, vegetable oil, fast food, snacks, chocolates, honey, sugar sweetened beverages, tea, coffee, jam, jelly, ice cream, bharta, potato mashed is very popular globally, also in Bangladesh, and vegetable and fish, street food, indigenous pitha and homemade cakes. So this is the winter season in Bangladesh, and this is the time of pitha, and our diabetic people are not visiting the doctor's chamber. They are engaged with pitha. After the winter season, they will come to the chamber with the very high blood sugar. So this is the challenge. Challenge is the high glycemic index foods. Almost every food we are taking daily, they are having at least moderate GI score, not the low GI. So most of the patients are of high GI index. And not only that, with low fiber intake. And usually the vegetables can have high fiber, processed food, white rice, and the bread we are taking with white flour, all are having no fiber. So we are taking less fiber with high GI foods every time. Now the cultural resistance to dietary changes. This is one important thing. In Bangladesh, most of the people are Muslim, few Hindus, and in the West Bengal, most of the Hindus. But we are similar in taking sweet dishes for our religious activities, all over. Not only that, the Bangla Novo, the beautiful one, the UNESCO approved the national program, but the same motto, we are taking huge sweets and other, only carbohydrate, carbohydrate and carbohydrate. So the religious and cultural programs all are imposing the, having the carbohydrate content foods. Not only that, the main reason behind the taking high carbohydrate or high GI food, this is the limited awareness. So the academic curriculum and the physician activities and the medical education should focus on the awareness building activities of the people. Now these are the some foods of Bangladesh. You can see the mainly carbohydrate, fish or some vegetable, and the pitha I told you. The our counterpart, the West Bengal, are also in the similar tone. The Bengali people, the Bengali diaspora, they are living in different countries. I told the UK, USA, UAE or other parts of the world. They are also trying to have the same food and with the some fast foods. But not only that, the macronutrients should also be considered in the development and the management of diabetes. So we are very much aware that many of the patients are coming with the micronutrient deficiencies. So what are those? Vitamin B, B complex, vitamin C. Vitamin C is very much attention nowadays. Vitamin D, it is now considered as the magic drug. Many of the people are having vitamin D deficiency, and probably you got the latest AAC statement that nobody should go for without highest clinical suspicion for going for vitamin D testing, but should supplement. Vitamin E, again, very important, especially for the low level of inflammatory condition. This can be acted as superoxide. Chromium also implicated, calcium, selenium, vanadium, carotenoid, iron, and essential fatty acids. They are also associated with the development of diabetes and implicated in management of diabetes. We published one beautiful data, the randomized control trial, zinc supplementation for improving glucose handling in pre-diabetes. We found the promising results. We supplemented for 6 months 30 milligram zinc daily, and the patient had low level of insulin resistance with higher insulin production. So what are the solutions? Promote low glycemic foods. What are the low glycemic foods? It has been discussed in several occasions. So we have to switch from high glycemic foods to low glycemic foods. Now, very important, the Bangshi Sabu was there. They published one data. They tried to find out the level of fibers we are taking and what are the association of diabetes and its complications. And they concluded that a high fiber diet is vital for people with diabetes and associated conditions. Increasing fiber intake, preferably through food or through dietary supplement, may help. Fiber-rich diabetes nutrition is recommended in order to prevent and manage type 2 diabetes mellitus. This is published from Bangshi and other Indian authors. So the main motto of this discussion is to increase education and awareness among the people, not only diabetic population, the family members and other people as well. And culturally tailored intervention. So all the culturally events should have the good health approach, reducing the high glycemic food content and adjusting with the low glycemic foods and the other macro and macronutrient considerations. So at the end, I can end by saying that diabetes is a growing concern among Bengali-speaking population influenced by traditional dietary habits. A high consumption of carbohydrates, sweets, and low fiber intake presents significant challenges in managing and preventing diabetes. However, there is potential to improve outcomes through culturally sensitive education, promoting low GI foods, and encouraging healthier cooking methods. This is promising. It is potentially a reversible situation. We can handle it. By understanding and addressing the dietary patterns and challenging specific to this population, healthcare providers can better assist in managing diabetes and improving overall health outcomes. So I am grateful to all of you for your kind attention.
Thank you, CMC team and Dr. Nigal Thomas, for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here. I think I feel like coming to a biochemistry class at 2 p.m. in the afternoon post-lunch. That's what Dr. Nihal and Dr. Felix wants. So we'll give them that. My objectives for this talk is to understand the role of traditional pathogenic features of insulin resistance and insulin secretion. The prelude to the talk is Dr. Madhu's talk. I'll be mostly talking and cross-linking adipogenesis with lipogenesis. We'll also look at pathways or cross-linking of these primary defects with hepatic de novo lipogenesis. Since morning, we have been speaking about gluconeogenesis, we've been speaking about MASLD, but we have been unsure about the trigger, which triggers the start of type 2 diabetes. We have spoken about the abnormalities, fat accumulation, lipid accumulation, but the trigger has not been known until recently. I'll be talking about that. There are some differential pathways in the liver cells where insulin resistance is prevalent and insulin sensitivity is maintained despite the whole body being insulin resistant. So we'll be looking at that, and we'll be also looking at role of diet in hepatic de novo lipogenesis and the different dietary macronutrients, glucose and fructose, and how they work with this. Quickly, we all understand that insulin resistance and insulin secretion form part of the game on top of lifestyle factors, and we've been mostly thinking that both these defects are primarily determined by genetics. And until recently, that's what we've been thinking, and we've also known for the liver to produce more glucose. What happens when the beta cell fails? We get diabetes and we get microvascular complications. If the beta cell continues to function and if you've got good beta cell genes, then you've got metabolic syndrome, fatty liver, and maybe other macrovascular complications. And then we looked at other probable defects or end organ effects of type 2 diabetes, but again, we've never found the causative problem of type 2 diabetes. We know that insulin resistance is present in most, invariably 99% of our type 2 diabetes, and the left is using a clamp. It's the most accurate way of assessing your total insulin sensitivity. And basically, when you look at controls compared with type 2 patients, these are particularly selective, lean patients selected to include the genetic aspects as well. When you look at it, the insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes is more. The right panel shows that compared to whole body sensitivity, the peripheral muscle uptake is even more resistant to insulin. So the glucose uptake in the muscle is reduced in DM patients, and this is more prominent in lean patients who are like, again, our thin fat Indian patients. Whenever type 2 diabetes studies are done, we compare lean, normal glucose tolerance, obese NGT, and then becomes obese diabetics and obese non-diabetics. So if you look at here, when the sugar level starts to climb, your insulin secretion comes down, insulin resistance starts, and it reaches an adder even when you're reaching the IGT. Once you reach impaired glucose tolerance, your insulin resistance doesn't change much. It's how your pancreatic beta cell responds, and once the pancreatic beta cell starts giving up, and that's when you have progression of diabetes, and that's when your diabetes microvascular complication clock sticks. And we know that first phase insulin response is lost in early type 2 diabetes, and as the diabetes progresses, this gets worsened. I'll just give you some quick data on some old studies where normal glucose tolerant individuals were compared with IGT and type 2 before we move on to the main part of the talk. And these are primarily OGTT studies, insulin clamp studies done by the veteran study and the San Antonio metabolism studies. Both are pivotal studies in knowing it's late 80s studies which showed basically how insulin secretion and insulin resistance partners with one another. So if you look at here, as you have normal glucose tolerance for a particular level of glucose, you secrete a particular amount of insulin. as you get into the IGT range, that is maintained, but the pancreas compensates for your beta cell secretion. But once you reach the diabetes, your secretion plummets down significantly, and the pathogenesis goes on. If you look at it the other way around, the disposition index is a marker of your insulin resistance to your secretion, which also plummets. And this is one other way of looking at it. Looking at your, these are log values per se, so they are not real numbers. So you have to look at a 2-hour plasma glucose value to your insulin secretory response, which is again a measure of insulin secretion and insulin resistance. So as your levels of sugar goes up, your insulin resistance stays the same, but your insulin secretion drops down significantly. And this is what you see in this slide also. These are from the same studies. And the other part of the conundrum is your fatty acid metabolism. People are aware that fatty acids have a direct impact on the pancreas and they impair beta cell function. And this one particular study where they looked at normal controls versus normal glucose tolerance family of type 2 individuals. So the orange panel is just non-diabetics but related to diabetic patients. And when you put them on a NEFA infusion, that is a non-esterified fatty acid infusion, they all develop, their C-peptide concentration significantly went down, and there was the first phase reduction of their insulin was around 60%, and the second phase was around 35%. So just by infusing NEFA over a period of time, your pancreatic beta cell function comes down. And this has been replicated because we know that patients who are at a high risk of developing diabetes in the future or patients related to diabetes have high NEFA levels in their blood. And this is another measure how much insulin response you need to lose before you develop diabetes. And this is where your genetics becomes a part of this equation, where people who are very, very insulin resistant, like the Pima Indians, Latino Hispanics, we come under between Pima Indians and the Latino Hispanics. We have somewhere around here, and these people literally need very less. They are highly insulin resistant, so they need little defects of beta cell function to become diabetics, whereas your white Caucasians need significant insulin resistance, insulin secretion droppage to develop type 2 diabetes. So we'll just skip this to time. So basically we are aware that these pathogenic features are there all the time. We don't know which is the chicken or the egg. And there is one more factor, which this is what Dr. Nihal wants to speak to me today about. And this is what we call as de novo lipogenesis. And de novo lipogenesis happens both in the liver and the adipocyte, but my talk would be prominently featuring de novo lipogenesis in the liver. And it's a metabolic pathway synthesizing fatty acids from circulating carbohydrates. And these fatty acids are then esterified inside the liver to glycerol hydroxyls, forming triacyl glycerol molecules. DNL primarily is in the liver, as I said, and for the total TG content of the liver, it is primarily very, very limited. But what happens as a marker in insulin resistance is what we are going to see. So the relevance of de novo lipogenesis may be, with regards to type 2 diabetes, is by an increased carbohydrate intake, and there are also metabolic differences attributed by glucose, fructose, sucrose to hepatic de novo lipogenesis. And this has become the area of interest because this might be the trigger which might be starting our final pathway of type 2 diabetes. So insulin resistance is associated with alterations in hepatic lipid metabolism, whereas further hepatic de novo lipogenesis aggravates your hyperinsulinemia, leading to further insulin resistance, and it kicks off a vicious cycle of events. And pathophysiologically, de novo synthesis of fatty acids in the liver involves a complex mechanism which I'm not going to go into, a process where acetyl-CoA is converted into malonyl-CoA. With several cycles of condensation decarboxylation, you get one palmitate molecule which forms part and parcel of your TG. And DNL in the liver can be measured isotopically, which we have got fantastic systems to measure DNL currently and more accurately than what we did in the early 2000s. And primarily, in normal people, 1 to 10% of your normal liver fat content is by de novo lipogenesis, whereas DNL accounts for 2 to 3 times more in patients with fatty liver or in type 2 diabetes. So the DNL pathway is more increased in type 2 diabetes. There are many pathogenetic factors responsible for this, but clearly circulating insulin is one thing, and with regards to the insulin resistance also plays a part in your hepatic de novo lipogenesis. These pathways, as we have spoken about in the morning in the first 4 lectures of Hall A, they are activated through your sterol responsive element binding protein and this carbohydrate response element binding protein. Respectively, the genes are activated through these. And this is a simplistic diagram of how DNL works in the liver. Basically, your glucose molecules through acetyl-CoA palmitate is formed, and then you get triacyl glycerols, which are stored or transported out of the liver cell. In simplistic term, your enterocytes, this is intestine, glucose gets absorbed into the liver, and you get DNL, endogenic free fatty acids, VLDL is exported, and then they get stored in the adipocyte, or you can directly get exogenous free fatty acids to the liver as well. So this is a common, most simplistic diagram. But why are we talking about it, and where does this regulate diabetes or fatty liver? So it's kind of a chicken or egg situation. Which one starts first is the problem. We are all aware that liver, we've had so much about liver. I will skip this slide. Liver is a dynamic organ which plays a lot of systemic plays in your glucose and lipid metabolism. When it comes to insulin resistance, fatty liver plays a huge part, and they are almost synonymous with one another. Cross-sectional studies using glucose clamp techniques have consistently showed that hepatic steatosis, independent of their BMI or adiposity, is associated with insulin action in the liver. In other words, if you've got insulin resistance, you will certainly have fatty liver, both peripherally as well as in the liver, and small increases in liver fat will be associated with further hepatic insulin resistance or muscular resistance. So just a few percentages will cause significant liver fat accumulation. What happens to peripheral insulin resistance in MASLD? Basically, you get hepatic steatosis, following which you develop peripheral insulin resistance and steatosis of whole body hyperglycemia. Before you get diabetes, you get steatosis is a must, followed by muscle insulin resistance, and then you develop type 2 diabetes. So you have to have impaired ability of insulin to suppress your adipose tissue lipolysis, leading to free fatty acids in the liver. I've got a couple of diagrams which will be a little bit more clearer, and increased de novo lipogenesis as well, as Dr. Madhu was alluding. Where does this come from? Just a little bit of history. There is fatty liver goes back to 2,500 years, and there was this practice of Egyptians feeding their wild birds they are rearing with huge amounts of carbohydrate. They didn't feed fat, they fed huge amount of carbohydrate during a period of about 4 weeks before they cull the birds, so that they can use their livers as a delicacy. So this fatty liver goes back to more than 2,500 years, practice in Egypt, and now fatty liver is being used as a called foie gras, if you've ever heard of it. It's a delicacy in France. Still, they put on birds through a 12-week period of excessive fat carbohydrate feeding, which the birds, kind of geese and ducks, are fed this high carbohydrate diet, where the liver accumulates more than 30 to 50% of fat, which becomes large, 3 times the amount of weight, and then becomes paler. And this is used in the food industry called foie gras, and quite expensive as well. So this has been practiced for many years by farmers who rear their birds, and this has been the hallmark of metabolic associated steatotic liver disease as well as diabetes. So we think that this might be the initiating point where type 2 diabetes kind of picks up, and there are a few things which we would look into in the future. So increased hepatic triglyceride content through de novo lipogenesis, where you get triglycerides accumulated in the liver, and part of it is exported out as VLDL particles, and part of it has got oxidation, but rest of it is kind of deposited. What happens is fatty acids are released into the systemic and the portal circulations normally. Fatty acids are then lipolyzed as well in TG through plasma lipoproteins from the liver. But what happens in diabetes or in insulin resistant patients is there is a predominant of fatty acid synthesis de novo from the non-lipid precursors in the liver, which increases your triglyceride deposition in the liver. As I said, this is selective insulin resistance to some pathways which are activated through the SREBP and the carbohydrate response element binding protein. And these are suspected to be started or initiated by a carbohydrate-rich diet, as in the foie gras manufacture. So here, patients are increasingly known to have energy intakes about 25 to 30%. They enter a period of positive balance, and this can also happen in obese or lean subjects. In the absence of overfeeding, this can revert back to normal, but if this continues, all these factors which I suggested will make it worse. And there are particular foods like fructose, glucose, and refined sugars which make this process worse. So compared to glucose, fructose is doubly worse. We have heard about the fructose corn syrup story, which is used in lots of processed foods. They are at least 10 times more lipogenic when compared to your normal glucose. So when you compare so this is the common binding pathway where fructose, glucose, acetyl-CoA and palmitate causes, and your cholesterol responding protein acts. When I said your insulin signaling varies, and this is what I meant, in overfeeding, your muscle and hepatocytes act. There is, in a period of overfeeding, you have reduced glucose uptake, so there is a lot of energy. Your liver goes into hepatic gluconeogenesis. Hyperglycemia, hyperinsulinemia leads to hepatic lipogenesis and hypertriglyceridemia. And this is exactly the breaking point which I want to concentrate on. The A panel is just normal. When you have insulin, it suppresses the mTOR pathway and the FOXO1 through the AKT pathway, which stops the lipogenesis and the gluconeogenesis. So if you look at here, insulin sensitivity, AKT pathway, lipogenesis is suppressed, gluconeogenesis is suppressed. The insulin has got a positive effect on the adipocyte as well, making less glycerol so that the activity, the system is under control. When there is insulin resistance, the FOXO1 is activated, which causes more gluconeogenesis, which also there is inadequate suppression of the triglyceride molecule, which causes more glycerol to come into the system. And then the whole sequence goes into an array of more gluconeogenesis, lipogenesis, and there is fatty liver deposition in the liver. These are some modulating studies due to mouse models. Basically, if you've got a strong insulin resistance allele, or if you've got a mouse model which is prone to hyperinsulinemia on high fat feeding, you develop the same thing of fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, and type 2 diabetes. And if one allele is cut off, they do not basically develop fatty liver or type 2 diabetes. And obese individuals, almost similar processes happen, decreased muscle uptake, whereas more triglycerides are deposited in the liver. And the more contributory factors are your fructose and dietary sugars again come into play, even your sugars, sucrose, and so on, predominantly more. So if you go on to a more refined sugar diet, this worsens. And if you look at, these are multiple studies which have looked at high calorie intake, carbohydrate load, fructose, glucose. Fructose plays a significant part as part of sugar sweetened beverages. High sugar intake through glucose as well causes DNL, and high carbohydrate load as well causes DNL. So in a nutshell, all this leads to increase more de novo lipogenesis. Coming back to Dr. Madhu's talk, this the science what I've told you today comes back to Roy Taylor's kind of hypothesis, the twin hypothesis, where you look at after bariatric surgery, your weight drops down significantly, fasting glucose comes down, and your triacylglycerol or triglycerides come remarkably low, and your sugar levels become normal, and your insulin sensitivity becomes very much normal. And the assumption is the liver loses all the fat deposition immediately after surgery, but your peripheral muscle resistance continues to stick on. So this is where the problem is. So if you lose the liver fat, your incidence of diabetes will be less, and you will be gaining less fatty liver. And this is coming back to your twin hypothesis again. So more liver fat, cycle A goes up, insulin secretion, insulin resistance. You develop or deposit more fat in the liver, your cycle B starts, you deposit more liver fat, more triacylglycerol, more pancreatic fat, and cycle B continues into type 2 diabetes. So in summary, type 2 diabetes is generally presumed to be due to insulin resistance and beta cell dysfunction. Additional processes like hepatic DNL contribute significantly for precipitation of type 2 diabetes. And hepatic steatosis precedes the development of skeletal muscle lipid accumulation, macrophage-related inflammation, hepatic skeletal muscle, or adipose tissue. So this might be a primary triggering pathway for worsening of type 2 diabetes or MASLD. Dietary glucose stimulates insulin secretion from pancreatic beta cells, and with hepatic insulin resistance, insulin fails to suppress your hepatic gluconeogenesis. So stimulation of DNL continues through residual activation of your SREBP, as I said earlier. So hepatic DNL is induced by increased carbohydrate intake and increased calorie intake. Both of this activate, but increased fructose consumption may also play a huge role in inducing these transcription factors and key lipogenic enzymes in DNL. Thank you so much for listening.
Namaste and good afternoon to everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank Professor Niall Thomas and organizing committee for inviting me for this prestigious moment. So I will be discussing in this 20 minutes regarding what are the dietary intake in Nepal and its impact with comparison to diet in India. So you can see the figure of my institute, B.B. Goyal Institute of Health Science, is in the eastern part of Nepal. So these are my outlines. So I will be focusing on dietary intake in India, Nepal, and the comparison of diet in Nepal and India, and what is the impacts, and at last a take-home message. So if you see the dietary intake in India, so we are aware of, we have heard lots of talk regarding the diets by our previous speaker, and we should not forget regarding the plate, what we are eating of foods. So as ADA also we have a thali term in the Nepal and India. So we have to divide the thali in the 4 parts, and again in the small parts which is seen here. And this has been written in the Indian policy book for what India eats. So I have taken from there, and you can see the amount of cereals and the carbohydrate, protein and fats and milk consumed by plate recommendation in India here. So you can see lots of them are taking the carbohydrates as already described by Dr. Madhu and Bangladesh diet also. So most of the percentage of food in India is comes from the cereals and pulses, and fat also they are consuming a lot. And milk, vegetable and fruits are less amount, and others are less than 10% according to ICMR and my plate plus recommendation. So these are the graph you can see here. So you can see most of the amount has been contributed 40% to cereals and millets, and less amount to the fruits, roots and tubers. You can see there, and nuts and oil seeds. So if we compare this plate method in urban India and rural India, the urban India are consuming lots of this carbohydrate, and rural India also is a similar thing. So in the urban India, mostly focusing in the North India, fat intake was highest, and the obesity and overweight and abdominal obesity was highest compared to other regions of India, and they were having more of hypertension and obesity. Northeast India are consuming high amount of carbohydrate, and they are also having hypertension, and the highest percentage of contribution protein was from 22% from, as already told, pulses and legumes, and highest percentage of protein in meats and poultry, food, seafood was observed in urban India in 16.9%, as compared to rural we can see 28% of them are southern region of India. So in this part of the world, Tamil Nadu, all they are taking also the lots amount of meats and poultry fishes. As for milk and milk products, only 8.7% in rural and 14.3% of population in urban areas of India consume as per that recommended intake. So if we compare with the rural India also consume lots of carbohydrates as compared to others. So vegetable consumption is only seen in East around 49%, and total calorie intake is contributed to ready to eat foods such as cheese, biscuits, chocolates, sweets and juices, and more than 10% among the majority of population in urban India. So this is the article published by Dr. Anup Mishra and his team, Nutrition and Diabetes in South Asia. So the food pattern and the cereals and millets and all the India, Pakistan, Bangladesh or Nepal, we are eating the same type of foods. The cereals is called gehu, chawal and millets like bajra, ragi and all. So these are the things they are consuming, and lots of them are consuming the sugar composition are more in the India or Southeast Asia as compared to the others, as Dr. Selim has already mentioned about the mishti doi and all, we have heard in previous talk. So in the Nepal, seeing the dietary intake in Nepal, the dietary diabetes is important contribute nutrition. So the thali which we are talking in India, we tell them as dal bhat tarkari in Nepal. So, and unlike the Indian eating style, the Indians are having more of rotis and paratha, but in Nepal we are having more of rice. And the starchy staples food are decreasing in Nepal, and fruits and vegetables, they are, we can see the minus, the consumption is that is decrease, okay, in the Nepal. So why the diet is important in the Nepal or India? Because we are nearby countries, we are neighboring countries, so lots of food and dietary habits are affected with this migration. So we are, our borders are near to Subu, you can see the mnemonics there, Sikkim, we are near to Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal and Uttarakhand. So I have come through the Bengal, I have come to Siliguri, I have come to Bagdogra flying here, to Vellore and to Chennai and Vellore. So the food habits are sometimes, we take the food from here and the people from Nepal, and so we have similar types of food there. So if you see all the food habits and dietary habits also depend on the country's food production index. So if you see the food production index of China, India, Pakistan and Nepal, obviously the China are in the front line. It is around 2017 data according to World Bank. 139% of food production, 1390 food production was seen in China, as compared to second is India and fourth is Nepal. So this is the typical thali you can see there, no? So you can see the Nepali thali with the rice in between and papad and all, and the Indian thali with the vegetable and with the roti and chapatis. So Nepali cuisine are, as already told, we are more of rice eating lover, but Indian cuisine are naan, chapati. But we have a hilly, mountain and Tarai region. So the types of food intake in Nepal is different in hilly, Tarai region and mountain regions. So in hilly region, the Nepalese are eating more of yak meat, momos and thupka. So most of you must have be eating this in your part of the world, in India also. And in Tarai region, we are eating more of, we are near to the Indian border, so we are eating of similar to the Indian, Bihar and all the lentils, rice and vegetables. But compared to the India, the North Indian dishes are famous for rich and creamy curries, while South Indian now, where we are now, spicy and tangy taste. The spices are more. So Indian cuisine have a wide variety of ingredients, including dairy products like ghee, yogurt, while Nepali cuisine have less amount of ghee keeping them. So you can see the paratha and the rice here, and it depends upon the spices also. So Nepali food have fewer spices and usually not as spicy as Indian food. And in Indian food we have a lot of turmeric, coriander and chili powder. That's why there's more spices. And in Nepali food we are using fenugreek seeds and seasoned pepper, and we are more inclined toward a simple cooking method like boiling and stir firing. I heard in previous lecture regarding the cooking method from the Dr. Selim. So it depends on cooking method also, the dietary intake of the food, of fats, protein. So complex cooking method technique is used in India, like tempering, marination and slow cooking. So number of food items by each country depends on we are in Nepal is sandwiched between the China and India, so it depends upon that. But most important part is cost of the food also. So this is the data from 2021. You can see in India and Nepal, the cost of the starchy staples and you can see these dairy products are more in India. But in Nepal, the cost of this, we can see here, the green one, vegetables and these oils are more in Nepal. So depending on the food, some people are consuming more of that, the cheap food than not the costly foods. That is the reason. So people are taking less fruits which are more expensive in Nepal, but more of rice which are cheap in the Nepal. So that is the reason we are becoming the rice eaters in both these continents. So it depends on season also, as we are on winter season now. So in Nepal, during the winter season, they try to eat lot of rices and all the soups and protein diet to make them warm. So similar in the India. So it depends upon that. So we have to have a dietary intervention for type 2 diabetes South Asian, and this art cartoon is focusing nicely on that. So what should be the dietary intervention? I'll be talking more in the further slides. These are some showing there should be some community support, social support, health insurance, literacy and gender is also affecting on these dietary behaviors of South Indians with type 2 diabetes. So what are the impact of this dietary intake in India? So as we all aware, we have heard from morning. So any increased intake of carbohydrate diet or fatty diet leads to the hypertension and diabetes. So in India also it increases the risk of diabetes by 30%, and milk and meat products have decreased the risk of hypertension if you take that. In Nepal, the high intake of carbohydrates are causing all those non-communicable disease, but there is a double impact of the nutrition also. It's not causing only the overweight, but it's also causing the undernutrition in the Nepal because of the less intake of food also. So we are landing onto the non-communicable diseases because the dietary pattern is changing from rural to urban India and Nepal. So more of them are having more of non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension and cancer and all. Then one of the important factor which Dr. Selim also had highlighted in Bangladesh, micronutrient deficiency is also prevalent in Nepal also with a varying level of effect. So this is a beautiful study done in quite back in 2013. So dietary shift in Nepal and its possible impact on overweight and obesity. From 1970 to 2010, there is a decrease in, surprising there is a decrease in carbohydrate intake, but there is an increase in the fat intake in 2010, but this is opposite now. So there are more of a carbohydrate intake than the others. So if you see one of the important non-communicable disease, diabetes, the dietary practices of type 2 diabetes mellitus in patient in Nepal, in the Lalitpuri, the central part of the Nepal, it has been seen that those people who having nuclear family, illiteracy, lower income, smoking and consumption of alcohol, poor family support, access in healthy food, and low engagement in physical activities influence dietary behavior among type 2 diabetes patients. So this has been produced or presented by our Dr. Selim also. And when we comparing this finding with India, it was similar finding was seen in the study conducted by Hamida Hospital in Bhopal, India, but by the study conducted in another part of India, it showed that about 37% responded follow a good diet plan for diabetes patient. We also have seen this data from the Nepal. It was regarding the influence of food habits on body mass Indian and Nepalese male adolescent, a comparative study. And among the 1950 male adolescent, there were 750 Indians and 1200 Nepalese. And in this study, it was seen that among overweight individual, 81% was non-vegetarian. So non-vegetarian hobbies are increasing in both India and Nepal, and 18% was vegetarian. So they concluded that intake of low-fat, low-energy diet over the course of 1 week in a stress-free environment had positive impact on the risk factor of obesity disease, promoting increased awareness of better physical culture and dietary habits are necessary to prevent obesity. This is the study done in India, and this study has concluded that positive significant association between complication of diabetes and dietary pattern. Physical activity like regular exercise and walking, fiber-rich diet, regular blood glucose checkup after 35 years are some of the preventive measures which can control the diabetes. There was a study done in Nepal also regarding the dietary practices among the type 2 diabetes in Nepal in recent study in 2024, and you can see in this graph the rice consumption is more, the 60%, chapati 48%, bread 27%, noodles we are having YY and also noodles intake is also increasing, is made of maida and is containing lots of carbohydrates, and they are not taking like fruits and others and low fat, whole milk and yogurt. These are consumption less in Nepal. Roots and tuber is also less in consumption, is quite more in 1 to 2 per month, but not per day. So there is a study done in published in BMJ regarding the drivers of healthy eating in workplace in Nepal. So this study was done in the hospital setting with the physician and workers, the staffs that are working in Nepal hospital. So one question was asked to the hospital staff there, and the staff have answered, my mother used to say the Coke is a good for gastritis. So when we were small, our mother used to tell, have a Coke, it will prevent your gastritis. So she would ask me to bring that black drink Coca-Cola. So these things are going on now also, and because of lack of time, sedentary lifestyle, the laziness of having the fresh water, they are drinking the Coca-Cola, and because of advertisement also. The celebrities are doing the advertisement of Coca-Cola, the ladies, beautiful ladies are doing the advertisement, and our juniors and our children are attracted toward that. And there is a myth also, washing white rice multiple times before cooking decreases the quantity of carbohydrates. So we are taking all those rice. Eating fruits and salad can increase the risk of diabetes. So these all are the myth, which is prevalent in Nepal also. I want to show that. So what are the barriers to healthy eating in Nepal? The study have found that is individual food preference, high cost of the healthy foods, which I have already shown in your previous slide, environmental unavailability of healthy option, lack of human resources to prepare healthy foods. So most of the youngsters in Nepal are migrating to foreign countries. We are now having lots of elderly population in Nepal and middle-aged population. And providers, so there are also the provider perspectives because of driver of healthy eatings or barriers for healthy eating in Nepal, like individual lack of knowledge and skill for healthy eating and healthy cooking, that is lacking. And environmental lack of adequate human resources, lack of food supply from local market. These are the barriers. This is the beautiful study recently published in Lancet, conducted in Nepal. This is a direct study, you must have aware of remission of diabetes with the diet. And this study was done in Kathmandu, in Metro Hospital by Dr. Jyoti Bhatra and her team. And they have done this study in the participant around, these were less participants, around 80 participants. And in this study, it was seen that the reduction of weight after taking the 850 calories per day of food, Nepalese food, which is having very low calorie diet, and at the last 52 weeks, they were kept on the maintenance diet of 1200 kilocalories per day. And it was seen that we can see the reduction of weight from 74 to 41 kg, 2.4 kg difference to 71, and HbA1c will also decrease. The cholesterol level was also have a decrease with this diet, and the patient who are taking glucose lowering medication was stopped prior to the study, and they were started when they were in need for that metformin or the other drugs, insulin, but they were mostly not kept on the OHA, and they were only kept on the diet 850 calories per day. So they also seen that body weight change and number of off glucose medication was significantly decreased in this study. And the remission was, they have seen the remission around 29% at the to 52 weeks, and it was around more than 30% or 39% at the 24 weeks. There was also another good study done in Nepal regarding the effectiveness of dietitian-led intervention in reducing the A1C among people with type 2 diabetes in Nepal. This was an open-label randomized controlled trial, and this study, 136 participants completed the trial, and 6-month follow-up, it was seen that dietitian-led intervention improved glycemic control and improved macronutrient intake and clinical outcome among the people with type 2 diabetes. There was a paper published regarding the state of diet-related non-communicable policies in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Tunisia and Vietnam, and it was a comparative assessment that introduces a policy cube approach. And it was seen with all the non-communicable diseases which is mentioned here across the countries like hypertension, diabetes, chronic heart disease, elderly and urban population. And you can see in the NCD policy cube, the Nepal was lacking in the equality, gender and rights or orientations and policies effectiveness, but comprehensive of the best by measures for educate in the Nepal. So if you see the data here among the Nepal and India, the overweight and obesity ratio is quite similar to both the countries. At last, what I want to say by my talk is Nepal and Indian cuisines have a lot of common because of their close geography and shared history. They have their own unique flavors and style. Even in rural population who usually consume traditional frugal diets, there is an increasing prevalence of cardiovascular risk factors and the metabolic syndrome due to changes in diet and lifestyles. Nationwide community intervention program aimed at creating awareness about the consequences of unhealthy food choices and replacing them by healthy food choices are urgently needed in urban and rural population in India and Nepal and other part of the South Asia. And this is the way we can come back with all this dietary effect and causing the non-communicable disease from education and counseling level to supportive public institution, mass media for create behavior changes like mass media and healthy diets, mass media and to reduce the salt intake instead of consuming Coca-Cola, smoking and all. So we have to have before watching movie, you can see the ad showing that smoking causes cancer. So such type of mass media promotion should be there in the movie hall or in the social markets, and this can be done only within the policy level. And I would like to request our two Prime Minister of Nepal and India, Honorable Modi and Honorable KP Oli, to go for that. Thank you very much.
To Dr. Nihal et al. For the kind invitation also. And I will start with a little religious statements. If you read this Arabic word, what is written here, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum siyama kama kutiba alladhina min qablika laghallakum tattaqoon. What does it mean? Ramadan fasting is not only for Muhammadiyans, for all other group also, including Jews, Jaina, Hindus, even for Christians, but different modalities people are using it. And that's mainly for purification of your body in terms of spiritual, in terms of physical. That's a message from this ayat. Now, if you see the Ramadan overview, you have 5 pillars in Islam. There are 5 pillars in Ramadan of Islam. Number 1, your belief, strong belief. Number 2 is compulsory namaz. Number 3, compulsory donation. Number 4 is Ramadan fasting. It is not compulsory for everyone. Please remember that. As chairperson was discussing, for a healthy individual, yes, you should observe Ramadan fasting. You know, usually it lasts about 29 to 30 days depending upon the position of moon. And in winter time is little short, and summer time it is little prolonged also. Usually for beginners, for students sitting over here, During Ramadan fasting, no food, no drugs, not even water. That's a peculiarity of Islamic or Ramadan fasting. And most of the people with the type 1 diabetes mellitus and type 2 diabetes mellitus, they are all observing Ramadan fasting. If you see the population with diabetes in among Muslim patients, it's not that uncommon, probably it's very sizable figure also. Now, if you see this data, Secret data, what is showed here is that 95% of the patients, type 2 diabetes mellitus, they are observing fasting at least for 15 days. And 2/3 of the patients, they are observing Ramadan fasting for entire month. If you see the lower panel, Darmina type 2 diabetes mellitus, this data is from Middle East, Arabian countries, and the data from North Africa, which showed around 86% of the patient with type 2 diabetes mellitus, they are observing Ramadan fasting. So it's very important to have a real guideline. That's the reason exactly IDF, all other professional forums, they are all coming with recommendations for treating diabetes during Ramadan. What's happening is very brief review of glucose homeostasis. If the patient is taking non-diabetic patients, your nutrients are there, your insulin level will come down, glucagon will go up. And because of the effect of insulin, your glycemic status is maintained to a normal level. If the patient has got diabetes mellitus, the insulin level is little defective, probably bioavailability of insulin is defective, so eventually you will develop hyperglycemia because of stimulation of glycogenolysis, gluconeogenesis, and eventual maintenance of glycemia or little hyperglycemia in type 2 diabetes mellitus. This phenomenon is little exaggerated, and if not checked properly, that will produce hyperglycemia and subsequent diabetic ketoacidosis in certain patients. These things are happening. Now, what are the data? You just read here. Epidiar data clearly showed around 20% of the patient will go for weight gain. Why weight gain? It's a very important question, because improper, little unscientific food intake. That is the importance of discussing the topic, and my knowledge in the nutrition management probably little. There are good or experts in the field of medicine or nutritional medicine. They will enlighten you, they will give a lot of information. Luckily, little reduction of triglyceride and little elevation of HDL is also documented. Regarding physical activity, in South India, physical activity is not really changed. But when you go to the Middle East area, Middle East, what's happening? See, they will take their sahur and they will go to the bed till Asr time, that's around 4 p.m. That also should not be encouraged. You should discourage that type of system, and for that you will get good metabolic milieu. Now, regarding the glycemic control, there is a chance for hypoglycemia, there is a chance for hyperglycemia also, depending upon the status of the patient. Now, this data, Epidiar data again, what is shown here in the type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus, there are chances for hypoglycemia with treatment, or without treatment also possible to certain extent. Absolutely normal healthy individuals are unlikely, but theoretically possible. And because of severe hypoglycemia, hospital admissions also little increased and hypoglycemic episodes also increased. In addition to that, you have lot of patients can develop dehydration to a significant degree, and we have seen few cases of thromboembolism or thrombosis, cerebrovascular accident also. These are the usual problems. Now, very critical question, people are thinking, what is the difference between intermittent or fancy fasting and religious fasting? Religious fasting, you have a definite laid out rules are there. You have specific time, motivation should be there, complications also possible. But intermittent fasting, there is no strict rules. You can have your own rules and the complication rate is not that high. What is happening like this, normal feeding, you have breakfast here, lunch and dinner. In the fourth panel, from 5 a.m. up to 6:30 p.m., your glycemias or sugar is slightly on the lower side, and subsequently what will happen, and that's also very important statement or theoretical aspects you should know. They are all taking lot of high calorie diet. Eventually, this patient will develop hyperglycemia, severe fatigue. So that can really reduce the efficiency of a patient with the type 2 diabetes mellitus. There are a lot of problems with the sleep pattern also. Sleep deprivation can occur, sleep changes, say diurnal change can occur. All these problems, what is happening if you are not sleeping, they will take lot of calorie also, because in a night time you can have your own diet at your convenience, everything is available. So people can take lot of calorie and eventually they will go for hyperglycemia. Now, what's the status of hunger? Hunger in the left panel, this panel is for males and this panel is for females. And during Ramadan, at around 4 p.m. or 5 p.m., hunger signal is getting accelerated. And what will happen is, if the hunger signal is very strong enough, that will produce severe symptoms also, and they will go for heavy food intake immediately after Ramadan. These are the physiological change. This is one of the beautiful data from Diabetes Care 2024 recommendation. There are 14 variables. You can read it from here 1 to 14. Depending upon the status, you can have a scoring system. This is endorsed by Islamic Pandits also. So if the patient belongs to a category of less than 3 or low risk category, yes, definitely fasting is very simple and safe. Nothing will happen. If the patient belongs to a category of high risk, definitely welcome Sri Kumaran sir. Please sir, yeah. And see, you can have problems during fasting. How do you manage this patient? Management, you have 4 pillars you have. One is dietary or medical nutritional treatment. Second is exercise, and I'm not touching anything on oral hypoglycemic agents and insulin treatment. My dear friends, probably the cornerstone in the management of diabetes mellitus during Ramadan or other times also, the best treatment modality is medical nutrition treatment. Fortunately, in my era, apps were not there. Now you have mobile app, online apps, and you can design the food for given patient. Now, this is the basic things. And you calculate the caloric intake or caloric requirement depending upon the weight and depending on the sex and the stature of the patient. And there are 2 types. Weight reduction methods are there, weight maintenance methods are there. Calculate the caloric intake, say for example 1000 kilocalories, something like that, and you divide into 3 major timing. One is at the time of iftar, at the time of suhoor, and iftar also you have 2 times, and you can have little snacks also in between. So what is happening here, this is happening in Middle East. I have witnessed this type of phenomenon in Middle East, okay. They are all taking very, very high caloric diet. They are taking mutton, they are taking chicken, they are taking beef. See, lot of oil is also there. For heaven's sake, I want to give a very simple message. Don't follow this type of unscientific foods for our patient with Ramadan. Now, if you look into the IDF recommendation, carbohydrate, it's around 40 to 50%. Protein content should be less than 30%, and you have sizable proportion from fat also. Ramadan plate method people were discussing and seems to be very good if you can follow that. Now, something known as glycemic index we should look into. We should know what's a glycemic index and all. And low glycemic index and low glycemic load foodstuffs should be taken for our patient with type 2 diabetes mellitus. Carbohydrate, always go for complex carbohydrate, not refined carbohydrate. These are the messages, simple messages. Choose wisely. Now certain foodstuffs, see refined flour is not really good. You can make it healthy by modifying the content of the powder, and always very heavy sugar dessert should not be taken, but it's very commonly people are consuming it. It's really not healthy for us. And carbohydrate from sugar and highly processed grains also should be discouraged for our patients. Regarding the protein part also, you can go for fish, you have a poultry, milk and dairy meals, but of course, certain types of protein containing that, or that contains little saturated fat also, that should not be entertained for patient with, especially during Ramadan time. Then fat also, everybody knows that the saturated fat is not good. You can go for lot of, sufficient amount of polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fat also for filling the fat percentage. These are the various types of the oils available with us. And the practical tip, always don't go for fast food system. Everywhere, every nook and corner, you can see the fast food system that contains lot of calorie, that contains probably lots of trans fatty acid also. Now, certain things of dietitian can really help you. Like certain things are really unhealthy. But with the modification, you can make them little healthy food stuff. These are the simple method. All these are available in the literature. Now, what is a healthy iftar meal plan? What is happening here, at least in Kerala state, we are all taking lot of unhealthy foodstuff. I will show you the foodstuffs. Basically, you start with a small foodstuff, like 1 or 2 dates. After that, 1 glass of juice, okay, without sugar is very good. After that, you have prayer, and you can go for a little extra heavy food that will be useful. And don't go for very heavy food after Ramadan, because very simple theory is your body is definitely weak at the time of 6 p.m. or iftar time. So at that time, if you are taking lot of calorie or carbohydrate, fat, protein and all, your body can't make it. Your body definitely can't utilize it, and you will develop fear fatigue, which I personally experienced. After that, you can't do any prayer also. So always the principle you should follow. That's a message. And suhoor at the time, probably after 3 a.m., the approximate calorie index should be around 450 to 600. These are the foodstuffs you can include in those food items. And you can delay the suhoor. In my childhood time and all, we were taking our suhoor at around 1 a.m. What will happen, up to 6 p.m., you are in the empty stomach. You will develop a lot of issues. So you can delay your suhoor probably just before 5 a.m. And this is yet another interesting area. Nutritionists definitely can help you. You can make certain foodstuffs little healthy. Like, one foodstuff in Kerala state is patri. Patri means, that's basically made from rice powder, refined powder. So if you are using whole grain flour, definitely glycemic index will come down. Like upama also you can modify. And parota is a Kerala's favorite food. Even though people are using it, really unhealthy food stuff, there is no doubt about that. But there are certain recommendations. You can go for wheat parota, something like that. I'm not very much aware of the significant difference between these two. Nombu kanji, it's a type of dish made out of rice. There also little modification. You can make them little more healthy. And samosa business, any street you go to Middle East or Dubai area and all, everywhere 4 o'clock onwards you can have this samosa business. And sweet drinks also, but people are adding lot of sugar also. This vada, again haram, is not really good. Okay, but of course in a moderate amount, a small amount, definitely you can take it. And kheer, fortunately, in Kerala state, people are not using kheer for iftar parties and all. There are various benefits with this modification. Stabilizes the blood sugar, reduces the risk of hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia, and gradual energy release. That's also very important, right? Okay, regarding the fruit, you look into the glycemic index. If you remember what is the glycemic index of guava, I don't know probably, but you can use this chart for your reference also. There are various types of the fruit steps are available. If you are interested, you can take this slide deck. Now, certain food, especially banana, one of the favorite food of South India, probably Middle India also, and it is not really good if you are consuming lot, but moderation is okay. Now, calorie of common Ramadan food. Again, don't ask me the calorie of all that Ramadan food. But I can tell you, people are taking lot of calorie, unwanted calorie, very heavy calorie. Eventually, you are inviting trouble. And these are the calorie. Fruit also calorie, you can read it from here. Whatever said and done, you go to any iftar party, to politicians area or any organization, people are taking this much of calorie. You know what's the calorie of each glass of kanchi and all? It's around 200 to 300. The fried items again 300 to 500, mutton curry, chicken curry, everything comes up around 2,000 kilocalorie at the time of iftar. I'm not joking, this is happening. And in Middle East, see, people are using certain drugs, arisa. Arisa means that contains lot of fat, protein and carbohydrate. One glass of arisa is enough for entire day. So what I want to tell you that don't go for very heavy food. If you are getting that message, I'm fully happy with that. Hydration steps, very, very important. You should take adequate amount of water, whatever be the form. Definitely dehydration is one of the major issue that can lead on to see breaking of Ramadan also. So sufficient hydration even after iftar time, after suhoor also should be taken to avoid all these issues. Regarding exercise, my dear friends, exercise is not contraindicated. Okay, exercise you can do it. But what's happening in, at least in my place, nobody is using it for this purpose. And this is yet another phenomenon is very commonly seen in Kerala state. Okay, people are not doing exercise, thinking that, and this fellow is taking a lot of high calorie diet also, sitting on the treadmill. Okay, and swimming is very good method, but people are not really swimming, they are simply watching this. All these unhealthy practices should be discouraged, and for a good outcome, my dear friends, see, balanced approach should be there. The control or management should be by your physician, dietitian and diabetic educator. Take sufficient balanced amount of diet. Hydration is also very important. Protein part, carbohydrate, fat, everything should be taken in sufficient quantity for a definitely that will lead on to a positive health. If you can do that, you are in a successful line. Otherwise, you will have a lot of problems. As Epidiar data showed, you are producing weight gain after Ramadan fasting. That is not the principle suggested by Prophet Muhammad. Thank you very much for the kind attention.
My talk today will be on this overview where we will look at child development and nutrition interlinks. And we have two birth cohorts where we will look at child nutrition trends here in Velo. And we had the opportunity to look at some of the child nutrition practices in the community as well. So let's head on to the child development nutrition interlinks. The picture on the right-hand side, actually, if you notice, that shows the development in the first 1,000 days of life, this one here, which shows that in the first 1,000 days, that is from the conception to year 2, the brain develops the maximum. We presume that around 85 to 90% of the brain develops in the first 1,000 days of life. Just like any other organ in the body, so early childhood factors affect that brain development, which can have longer effect because brain doesn't grow as much as in the first 1,000 days of life. So these factors can decrease or affect the human potential. There is actually quite a bit of debate about the first 1,000 days. As developmental pediatricians, we talk about the second 1,000, the third 1,000 days. And definitely that is why most of us are interested in the early childhood nutrition as well. So coming to the birth cohorts that we have in Velo, we are fortunate to have 3 birth cohorts which we exclusively looked at childhood growth and nutrition and development. There is an older cohort that you may be all familiar with. So we had the malady cohort, malnutrition and enteric diseases cohort, recruited 2010 to 12, and the CRI or the rotavirus cohort recruited in 2002. The advantage is we have robust baseline information about these 2 cohorts, and we have the 3rd cohort being recruited now. And this is where we are located, and I think most of you may be familiar with where Vellore in the context of the whole country is. This is actually the follow-up that of both Malady as well as the CRA cohort. Malady has more extensive information. We have around 250 children enrolled in the Malady. Quite a bit of extensive information, and at 9 and 12 years, unlike a lot of birth cohorts world over, we have neuroimaging, MRI brain, also in addition to the nutritional analysis that we have done in this cohort. In the rotavirus cohort that you can see that we are doing currently the 2021 year follow-up. So what are the strengths that our team brings to the table? We actually have quite good in an integrative analysis, including anthropometry, neurocognition. We have looked at metabolic and micronutrient analysis, and also, as I already suggested, the brain volumetric analysis as well. I'll talk about the hyperfine soon, but just to give an overview of what we bring to the table. See, when we looked at development, from our pediatric point of view, we look at development in 4 domains: the cognition, language, motor, and social. When we followed our children up, they're very good initially at 6 months, and over time, actually, you can see it just goes down. This is actually a pictorial representation of all the 4 domains. And when we are looking at what might have caused this over time, I just have highlighted some of the nutrient factors. You can see stunting, being underweight, and the body iron levels actually have an important components in determining this trajectory in the 3 domains that is demonstrated here. Also want to talk about some of the micronutrient effect, including early childhood and the lead toxicity. And when we are looking at actually the cohort, you can see that 51% of our children were anemic at, this is not working that well here, 51% were anemic at 7 months, but had non-iron causes of anemia. But as expected at 15 months, the highest contributor was iron deficient anemia, and it improves over time. And when we are looking at the 2-year cognition, we can see that the lead levels, actually the mean blood levels, mind you, if you look at the numbers, actually the numbers are quite high. 97% of our cohort had high lead levels. We have used a cutoff of 5 than 10. So that mean blood lead level had an influence at 2 years of age, while the iron levels had prospectively an effect at 5 years of cognition scores. We were quite interested because many of our children had small head circumference. You can see that the head circumference, 50% of our children in this cohort had small head circumference by 2 years of age. So lower head circumference at 1, 12, and 24 months actually were associated with the stunting at that corresponding time points, and this has given you actually the odds ratio for each time point. And as expected, the paternal head circumference, the maternal head circumference were predictors. We always correct when we see small head circumference. And the criticism can be, is it actually a transgenerational transmission of poverty that we are seeing? That can be a question that we can be raised as well, but these are the predictors that we saw. We wanted some easy tool to do an early development screening tool, and we thought, why not head circumference? And when we looked at head circumference, conventionally we take -2 as the microcephaly, while we have taken the -3 standard deviation, and that can be used as an easy screening tool. All these papers are published and freely available. And when we looked at -3 standard deviation, actually it can be concurrently used as well as predictively used for screening for cognition at both 2 and 5 years of age. So if you're doing a community study and you want to pick up children who need help, this is actually a fantastic measure to do as well. So this is a 5-year assessment. I'll go a little fast because of time. So we just wanted to know what happens to our stunted children. 45% of our children at 2 years were stunted. And what happened to them? Very few studies world over talk about catch-up growth, and we are fortunate to have the opportunity to do this. So when we see actually 10% of the cohort were stunted at all time points, and as you can see by 9 years, 80% of stunted children catch up. Again, this is published. So looking at the stunting and catch-up growth on cognition, children stunted at all time points actually had a 0.3 standard deviation difference in the cognition, both verbal, as well as the total cognition compared to children never standard. This is quite a significant from the cognition point of view, highlighting the importance of nutrition in children in cognition. So this is actually, we wanted to do more than this. We wanted to see how the early childhood stunting, how does it affect cognition? How is the brain affected? Which parts are these reversible? And it's not fully elucidated, and very, very few studies are there, from any parts of the world. So neuroimaging in children stunted in early childhood, we were the first team to do this. And you can see, actually, we did a 3T MRI. We were fortunate to have a volumetric, and from Harvard to do a volumetric analysis. I'll just quickly go through this. You can see the total brain, the subcortical gray matter, all these are affected. Group NS is never stunted. Group S2 and 5 is stunted at 2 years and caught up by 5 years. S5 and N9 stunted at 2, 5, caught up by 9, and group AS is always stunted. So each p-value is, we have compared with the never stunted group. But when we look at the total brain, it is actually affected subcortical gray matter, the unsegmented white matter. All these actually, there's some amount of data looking at the total cortical overall brain matter and white matter and gray matter. But the cerebellar findings are new. We have shown actually that cerebellar, both left and right, white matter and gray matter actually are significantly lower in children who were always stunted compared to never stunted. And we could show that there's some specific areas of the brain more affected. If I may just go through, posterior corpus callosum joins the association areas of the brain. We can see the left lateral occipital, the right lateral occipital. You can see the thalamic regions. You can see the caudate and the pallidum both sides. So all these areas actually are networking and coordinating areas, and we need further evaluation to see why these areas are more involved in stunting. So corpus callosum, as I said, is actually links both sides of the brain. The posterior corpus callosum is in vision and association areas. Basal ganglia is not just for motor coordination. It is involved in multiple factors. If we say brain is a mystery, cerebellum is a mystery within the mystery. Conventionally, we say motor coordination, but there are a lot of studies that come now that talk about speech, cognition, awareness. All these are now linked to cerebellum. So now just come to the second part of my talk, which is about child nutrition trends in malady cohort. This I already discussed with you. Very good. By 9 years, 80% of our cohort, 80% standard children have caught up. Very good. Now this is analysis we have done with the TIFA team. If you look at the BMI trend, it's looking good till 7 years, but they actually start going up by 9 years of age. This is actually on the right-hand side. Actually, you can see children who are being overweight and obese. And we are, mind you, this is a low middle income cohort, but by 9 years, we are seeing almost 14% of this cohort being overweight, obese. We're wondering whether there is an onset of double burden of malnutrition by around the 7 to 9 years of age. So then we were interested to see what happens to the lipid and sugar profile of these children. Actually, comparing 9 years and 12 years, there is a difference in most of the parameters. Actually, they're going to the little bit on the worse side. So we just looked into a little different way. You can see a metabolic abnormality where there is at least one lipid bar sugar abnormality. Almost 17% at 9 years were normal, and only 10% at 12 years were normal. 90% of this low middle income cohort, where 45% of our children were stunted at 2 years of age, have at least one abnormal lipid and sugar profile. So what is guiding this? Actually, you can see here, I'm sorry, this is a little smaller, the thing. The sugars don't look that bad, but what we were surprised to see actually were the triglycerides. You can see they being on more than 50% having affected, and also the NHDL also being on the higher side. So looking at both the cohorts, the CRI and the malady cohort, children in the malady cohort actually are a little bit more taller at 3 years of age. You can see the profile here. The malady cohort is actually on the red one. The Z-scores are better compared to the CRI cohort. So what guides this? You can see, as expected, low birth weight is actually a predictor both sides. But what we found comparing both of them, socioeconomic status became better in the newer cohort. Huge improvement in Tamil Nadu in the last 2-3 decades since I myself have been here. And also you can see maternal education also is a strong driver. So we did a scoping survey with the government of Tamil Nadu. Other partners were Jayapaul, IFPRI, Cornell, funded by the government of Tamil Nadu. We went back to the community, looked at what are the breastfeeding practices in the community, and this is something I'm not surprised to see this, but some of my colleagues were. You can see that by 4 months, the current recommendation is 6 months exclusive breastfeeding. You can see around, when we're seeing 75% may be breastfeeding exclusively by 3 months. And by 6 months, only 25% were exclusively breastfeeding. And when we look at Tamil Nadu, actually these are some of the indicators, and indicators look good. Stunting has improved, undernutrition has improved. But what is happening to women 15 to 49 years? Like, let's look at the BMI, low BMI. In NFHS 3, that is 2005 to 2006, it was 28%, it's improved to 12.6%, great. But at the same time, women who are overweight or obese also has become double. It was 20% earlier in 2005 to 6, and it's become now 40%. So I'll just get your attention to the figure on the right side. We looked at what are the complementary feeding practices, and you can see between 6 to 23 months, 30%, this is rural-urban. We expected a big difference between rural-urban, but we didn't find that. You can see 30% of our children are consuming sweet beverages, including, somebody was talking about Coca-Cola and other sweet drinks, including sweetened tea, milk, all these start quite early. And a lot of unhealthy food consumption as well. And the dietary diversity actually is quite low in these children at 6 to 23 months of age. So we wanted to see whether it is an issue with availability or there are some other cultural practices. Actually, maternal consumption is not bad. Maternal consumption of grain, pulses, dairy products, other fruits and vegetables actually show that there is availability. But many times cultural practices, beliefs, some other family influences cause a gap in feeding and in children, that not really the availability. So I just wanted to compare what we saw in the scoping survey and what we saw in the malady. Around 25% exclusively breastfed at 6 months. And when we asked mothers what is the issue, 22% lactating mothers were not confident of breastfeeding. Most common highlighted challenge, they were not comfortable about the adequacy of breast milk. So we went back to the malady and saw exclusive breastfeeding was 2.5 months approximately. So remember, 75% were 3 months exclusively breastfed. Formula or animal milk in the malady was introduced around 5 months. Solid food was given slightly earlier, around 4 months, and the total duration of breastfeeding, if you take the full breastfeeding time, was 15 months. So similar trends, it has not changed much compared, in a decade. So we actually are fortunate to get this because we do a lot of imaging analysis. We got the first portable hyperfine MRI in the country for research, and CMC Velo is the first institute in the country to have that. And we will be doing further childhood growth, development, nutrition analysis using this. Spectroscopy also is available here, and it's in the community. So coming to the limitations of the malady cohort, definitely comparatively smaller size, but quite a number of strengths. Low-income urban slum setting, a fairly good follow-up, strong data granularity and standardized measures, and we have used standardized blood results from the National Reference Laboratory, that is CMC Velo, and we had fairly good QA/QC in this. So I'll just quickly go through the conclusions. I think I'm finishing before time. Significant decline in developmental scores from 6 to 36 months, contributed both by stunting and underweight. High prevalence of small head circumference. We have used 3 standard deviation score as cutoff, which we found it useful. So if any of you are interested in doing a quick analysis in the community, this is actually a fantastic measure. High prevalence of high lead levels and iron deficiency. It is associated with cognition at 2 and 5 years of age, respectively. Improvement in stunting is noticed in Velo urban slum birth cohorts. Actually, comparing the CRI and the malady cohort is driven by CS and maternal education. As I showed now, children studied earlier had smaller cerebellar cortices, basal ganglia, posterior corpus callosum, thalamus. We wonder whether the networking and the connecting centers are involved. It's not the primary sensory or motor areas, but the connecting centers are more involved. We don't know whether it's related to higher order skills. We have just doing an EF paper, executive function paper, that may show us more results. Coming to the more nutrition aspects, 10% of the cohort remained stunted throughout early and mid-childhood in our birth cohort. 80% children stunted at 2 years. They catch up in growth by 9 years. It looks like the double burden of malnutrition is starting by mid-childhood from our cohort. As I said, the high triglyceride, low HDL, high NHDL, evidenced by 9 years and worsening by 12 years. 90% at 12 years have at least one abnormality. Dietary survey less than 2 years shows that early consumption of unhealthy and sweetened diet and poor dietary diversity. So where are the future directions our team is going on? We are looking at the double burden, a triple burden of malnutrition with the TIFA Mumbai using our birth cohorts. We are currently doing the PRISMA Remind study. We're looking at maternal anemia and effect on childhood growth, development, and brain morphometry. We just got a funding from Gates for a MMS Plus study where we'll be doing micronutrient supplement study for mothers. We continue our study of role of micronutrients in child development, cognition, and growth. And the malady cohort are going to turn 15 now, so we'll again start our follow-up of this cohort where we look at micronutrient status.